All right. Fact check this podcast, episode 16. Today we are interviewing Phil. Phil is my buddy here in Indiana. We work together, and Phil is a member of the Peddling Fiction Facebook group and a pretty staunch libertarian. So I'm going to let Phil introduce himself and tell you how he came around to libertarianism, and then we'll go from there. Take it away, Phil.
So yeah, like you said, I'm Phil. I grew up pretty conservative, and it was probably around the 2012 Romney election, where I was in college at a very, very liberal college. Being very conservative was very difficult in that chance. But the Romney election, I looked and I was like, there's got to be somebody that actually wants to do something for this country. Because growing up in Indiana, it's very, very conservative. And we're really wanting, we really just want people. I mean, a lot of people I know, they just want them to leave them alone. And that's kind of where I really came towards libertarianism was in 2012. And then when I graduated 2014, I had heard about Johnson. He wasn't the best, but he was basically a screw you vote when I voted for him in 2016. And then from then on, I just kept delving further and further into it, realizing that, man, nobody in the government actually gives a crap about any of us. Conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, nobody. They all want to say they do, but for a lot of us people, we just want to, I mean, at least in my case, I just want to live a simple life where I, do whatever I want and not harm anybody else and just leave me alone. It's pretty simple in that case.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm glad you touched on that, because the most irredeeming thing for me with the Republican Party was the Romney nomination. With the bailouts and everything at the end of Bush, that really pissed me off and really started, completely turning me off. And then Ron Paul came on and I started seeing him, and the McCain Palin ticket was horrible. And I really kind of I stopped giving a shit about the Republican Party at that point. But then at 12, when they came and they nominated Romney, it was just like there's nothing redeemable about the Republican Party at this point. Like, they picked fucking Mitt Romney, and I was done with it. So, how did you take all of that? Because you, like you said, you grew up very conservative, or at least for the most part, and just from our conversations in person and stuff, I know you have a pretty conservative family. So how did that kind of strike you?
It really, especially with Romney, whenever I was more realizing, I was at this time also, I was studying in college. I majored in philosophy and religion, and then had my minor was in American history. And so in 2012, 2013, I took a multitude of classes that were involving pre-Civil War and American Revolutionary history. And the more and more I took, even though it was a very liberal college, the more and more I took out of these classes was, man, America's really messed up. And Romney didn't help that situation, and nobody was helping that situation. But Romney especially was the most milquetoast candidate that you could possibly put up. He didn't have a backbone. He didn't want to sit there and actually try and fix the economy. He was just like, oh yeah, we'll play along with their games, try and make things move forward. And that'll do nothing. It creates more problems for later on, and that he didn't have to worry about, or nobody was going to have to worry about. And I'm sitting here going, this is not sustainable for anybody. When it came to the bailouts, I mean, I went to college essentially free because I was super poor and my mom worked there. And I was like, I gave up the opportunity to go overseas and study at Harlaxton College, I went to UE here in Evansville. And Harlaxton was like their overseas specialty place where you got to go to England and you could go study abroad in Europe and all this other stuff. And all of my friends went, but I couldn't go over there without taking out $10,000 to $12,000, $15,000 into debt. And as someone who I don't like having debt in general, and I know how the economics works growing up in a conservative family where if you don't have money to pay for something, you don't get it. I mean, funny story, I didn't have a cell phone until I was 16 because my dad said if you want one, you can pay for it yourself, you know. And along those lines, I think my conservative upbringing in economics was very helpful. Knowing that if I mean they're bailing out all these companies that they failed. That's what companies do, right? But if I was to go and take a loan out and I didn't pay it back, I'd file bankruptcy and I'd lose everything. Why not these companies do the same thing? So that was 2012 when all that crap was going down with everything, and Romney didn't want to have any kind of fixing that system. I was like, man, there's got to be something better than this.
Yeah, and it's so at the time in 2008 when all that was going down, I was working. I'd been out of college for a little over a year and had been employed and had my and I was making really good money. So I had definitely had my fill of watching my tax dollars or seeing the number that went towards taxes on my paycheck every week when I had a really good job, and getting pretty pissed off about that along the way, and then to see where my money was going to bail out these companies that, like, everything that led up to that point was their own doing. And like you said, like if I fucked up my own finances like that to that extent for that long, I would be the one left holding the bag. I'm not getting a government bailout. Nobody's coming to rescue me if I rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and just because of bad business practices and ignorant borrowing can't pay it back. And like the housing bubble and the recession and everything that kind of led up to that and created that whole situation, the companies that were getting bailed out were complicit in all of that. Like they were contributors to that entire situation, and they just got a free pass. So on that, I know you've got a lot of thoughts on it because that goes into it's cronyism, which is something that I talk about regularly. We don't have actual capitalism; we have cronyism.
Oh yeah.
And there is no accountability for anybody in either government or in the private sector to make good decisions. And I know you've got thoughts on that. You want to take it over a little bit?
Yeah, on the cronyism aspect, I mean, it's basically simple. It's the government is in bed with big business, and they will continue to keep doing things the way that they're doing because that's the only way that they, know how to work. I had posted a thing about from the Mises Caucus or Mises, I don't know how to pronounce it, not too long ago about how the government is actually the ones that's screwing over small businesses. And I had multiple people who I know who are on the left who were talking about it. And in their explanation, they kept saying, oh, well, it's the big businesses that's screwing everybody over because, they're making money off of this pandemic. And so they're just, doing everything. And I said, well, how are they doing it? And he was like, well, they have so much. And I said, and they have the government force keeping behind them who are forcing and keeping these small businesses from being able to work. I'm like, that of course they're going to do that. They're businesses. They're out to make profits. They're going to do whatever they can. And a big business is going to come over and be like, hey, big government's going to come over and be like, hey, you want us to, help you out on this as long as you kick a little back to us? And they're like, yeah, sure, absolutely. They make more profit. Therefore, we just continue this cycle where the government sleeps with business and the business sleeps with government, and it screws everybody who wants to try and make money for themselves out of the whole equation. And big business does not it I've blown away by the idea that a lot of people who I know at least said that libertarianism would just be big businesses running over everybody, and if nobody will all be enslaved to the big businesses. And I said we already are enslaved to the big business. It's because they're sleeping with the government. And if you had libertarianism, if you had a free market where people decided what they wanted instead of the government deciding who can be essential, then that changes the whole direction of everything. It changes the whole equation. That means that businesses that are smaller, that have better ideas, but they can't stay open because of the government mandates, they don't get screwed anymore. People are smart. And even if they aren't smart, people can make decisions for themselves. I don't have to be everybody's daddy. I don't want the government to be my daddy. I want to be, I have my own body autonomy and everything else. I can speak for myself. And why do I need to have somebody tell me that, oh, well, this isn't safe, or this isn't, that isn't safe, or all these other things? I was like, then I'll buy the people who I know are safe, or I'll take the risk knowing that maybe it's not safe. That's up to me. It's on me. Why do we have to place responsibility on government?
Right. And talking about that, you know, not just that the big businesses are in bed with the government, but also the government then, because of that relationship, the government then uses all of their regulations and restrictions and different taxes and everything that basically make it almost impossible for a small business to be sustainable long term. Like, in order to get through all of the regulations and the filings and the taxes and everything, like, you almost have to be able to float yourself as a business for like the first 5 to 8 years, just to get through all of the government, like, actively trying to run you into the ground to make sure that you don't have the opportunity to compete. How many
Yeah,
of these small businesses that are closing because of COVID, is it not just because the government shut them down for COVID, but it's because of the tax bill that they still have to pay to the government, and all the regulations and the filing fees and everything else that the government still imposes on them, even though the government's not allowing them to do business, but they're still just beating the hell out of them with all
yeah.
of these regulations. Like, it's insane.
Yeah. I mean, a personal story along the lines of government regulations and the issues with it, though it may not have to do with COVID. My brother owns a small business. And before he could take the business over, they made him tear up the bottom of his building, put in 1,000-gallon grease trap instead of I think it was a 120-gallon grease trap underneath his business. You know how much grease he creates in a week? Half a gallon. But he had to have this 1,000-gallon grease trap because that's what the government decided. That's what the city government decided he needed to have to be able to be a restaurant. And it was the dumbest thing in the world because he had to go out and spend 10,000 extra dollars to get this stupid little thing fixed when he doesn't use that much grease. He makes flat top burgers. That's all he does. And it doesn't create that much grease because the meat soaks up the burgers and it tastes wonderful, right? But he doesn't create that much grease. And it's so stupid that, I mean, it may not have been COVID related, but it's still government regulations, city government saying that, oh no, you have to put this in or else you can't have your restaurant here. And he's like, I don't even use that much.
And it's
Why?
all
This is
arbitrary.
stupid.
Like, none of the numbers that they come up with have any foundation in reality. Like, it's all just some. It's like what Johnny talks about on the on peddling fiction with the 2% inflation, and like all the
Yeah,
different, the arbitrary numbers that the government comes up with as these like, as either these baselines or the expectations or whatever. Like, uh, none of them have any real math behind them. It's just whatever bullshit somebody came up with off the top of their head. Like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good number. Like, 1,000-gallon grease trap. Why not? We don't know how much 1,000 gallons is. We're all fucking idiots. We've never actually worked in a restaurant in our life, you know?
yeah, and I'm just like, that's the dumbest thing in the world because again, the 120-gallon one, they've never had a problem with it. The business has been there for over 20 years, and they've never had an issue with it at all. But for some reason, for it to change hands between the guy who owns it and my brother, who's worked there for 8 years of his life, and now is trying to take the business over after the guy retires, they have to put this thing in, and it's the dumbest thing in the world. It's so stupid. And I feel bad for my brother more than anybody because I mean he's an entrepreneur. He's taking out the loan and he's making the investment into this small business, knowing that he's taking a lot of risk in doing so. And government just keeps getting in his way, all on every aspect of it. This COVID-19 stuff hit him real hard. Before they were like, okay, yeah, you can open up, but you have 4 tables and that's it. Not like he needs many tables anyway. It's mostly a grab and go kind of place. But he was like, there was 2 months where we couldn't have any of our daily lunch specials, which means the all the meat and all the stuff that we had to make lunches, they all went bad, and I lost money on that and everything else. And then finally they were like, okay, well you can open up, but most people have to take it out, blah blah blah. whatever. He's just like, it's so dumb because the place right down the street where, they had, I mean, it's right next to a factory, and this factory, I mean, it's a great factory. It's good for business here in Evansville, but like they have 10, not tens of thousands, like 5,000 people that go in through there, daily and everything else. And they wear their mask and they do everything else, but it's like 5,000 people in this one factory. And then my brother can barely get 100 people into his store throughout the day because he's limited on people. And it's just, I'm so fed up with it, even on his sake.
Well, that's like you and I both work at Lowe's, so we we have. It would be a lie to say we have not done well for all of this. I mean,
Oh, that's dumb too. Yeah.
for me personally, I was a sales specialist there for several months, and I was incentive based with bonuses and stuff because for making sales goals. And with everything as crazy as it's been, and Lowe's being as busy as it's been, I mean, I racked up on bonuses and stuff. As a company, Lowe's is killing it. So when we get mad about the small businesses being closed and stuff, it's not it's not because we're being affected by that. I mean, we see the people who are being affected by that. We've been the opposite. We've been very blessed by this whole thing, and without hesitation, I think both of us would willingly say, close down Lowe's and let some of these small businesses have a chance. Like, let the people who are failing get at it, because we can do other stuff. Like, we can figure out ways to make money.
I mean, yeah, I'm CDL truck driver. If Lowe's closed down or any of these places closed down, I'm one of the most in demand places where I can just go get a job right off the street. It wouldn't bother me at all. And Lowe's on that aspect of it, I think it's an unfair market advantage that Lowe's has, being deemed an essential business by who? The government. And I just happened to work there. Nobody could foresee COVID or something coming, and so we just happened to be at a place that was deemed an essential business. In which, again, I can't say anything for. I'm just lucky to be part of it. But other little places, like we have a little store out in Mount Vernon. I mean, he's had to close down, and then he finally got the chance to open back up, and now he's kind of struggling through it. But I mean, he's getting through it, but barely. He's been hanging on by the skin of his teeth, because during that time when everyone was doing their home projects, he had to close down because he's in the downtown part of Mount Vernon, and Lowe's, 20 minutes down the streets could have, hundreds of people in it and not even think twice.
Right. I mean, basically with no restriction. I mean, for the very, very brief amount of time that we were supposed to do head counts at the door and stuff, like that, it was short lived, and like we really have not been impeded in any way, and neither has Walmart or any of the big box stores, and those are the places that, in all honesty, could afford to have 6 months of getting told to shut down and not do this stuff. Like they've got the coffers to withstand that. They've got the assets and everything. Like the whole thing is all of the mandates and restrictions and guidelines and all of that. It's all a farce. Like it really just shows how deeply embedded big business is with the government, and the way the whole thing has been handled it's a joke.
Mm-hmm. Definitely is.
All right, so getting off of COVID and that stuff, what else was it you wanted to talk about? You wanted to talk about some religion stuff, since that's what you philosophy and religion was your.
Right, you're right. As you can see, my little flag right behind me. You may not be able to see it clearly, but it's a pine tree with it says an appeal to heaven. So as I've also grown in my faith, conservative wise, um, being a conservative starting out with, and I was raised Southern Baptist, and I still, go to church or watch the church services online. And the more and more I keep delving into Christian faith, as I have for so long now, and then the more and more I delve into libertarianism, the more and more I see how these two actually go hand in hand. Because I've been told a lot, and a lot of people who are Christians are told that, oh, well, you need to be either, the super conservative Christians who hate everybody and they just want to see the world burn and blah blah blah, or you need to be the super loving Christians who want to give everything away even they don't have anything to give away. And the more and more I look at it, the more and more I'm like, these guys on on the right side, they're hating people for things that they choose to do. Why are we hating people for something like that? And on the left side, why are we stealing from people who have to give to the have-nots? Right? Like Christianity, Jesus wasn't Robin Hood. He didn't steal from the rich to give to the poor. Jesus, he had the rich man come to him, and that parable is the one that sticks in my mind the most. But when he had the rich man come to him, he asked, "What must I do to enter heaven?" And he said, "Go and give away all of your riches." And the breakdown of that is that there wasn't him saying, like, you have to give me all of your riches and I'll give them out to everybody. He said there was a choice that rich man had to make. And in the end of the story is sad. Then the rich man holds on to his stuff, for he was very wealthy, even though he kept all the commandments and everything. And that's when he says that it's easier for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. And what he was saying there is, it's like, being rich is not the issue. It's what you do with your money. And he didn't force that man to give his money away. He told him to give his money away. And I feel like that speaks volumes to libertarianism, especially because a lot of us, I mean, you and myself included, I know, I mean, I give to missionaries and to charities out of I'm not going to say meager income that I have, but I mean, I don't have a lot of money laying around, but there's the money that I give, I know where it's going, and I know that it's being put towards a good thing. And I give it to the charities, and I'd much rather give the money that I have to charities, because charities, they'll tell you exactly what they're spending the money on. They'll tell you, like, they'll give you an outline. If you ask them, this is how much this was paid, this is how much this was paid, blah, 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 this is what we spent, this is what we did with it. Government, you go, hey, what are you doing with this? They're like, we spent $1,200 on a cup, the stupid things like that. And so when it comes to the money aspect of it, having private charities run things works so much better than the government. And it has to be a choice in this matter. Now, does that come with its own issues? Absolutely. We understand that there's a lot of poorer people in the world, and maybe these rich people don't want to give their money out. I understand that. But when you take from people and force people to give into things, claiming it's for society or something else, and then you turn around and ask, hey, what happened to my money? Where did it go? And you see that they spend they waste almost $4 out of every $5 collected by the government or something like that. That's ridiculous. Like, if a charity was run that way, people would stop giving money to the charity, but we are forced to keep giving our money to the government because they're the only ones who have, what did Ron Paul and Rand or Ron or whichever one called it, they're the only ones who can do it with violence, whatever.
The monopoly on violence.
There you go. They have monopoly on violence. So if we don't pay our taxes, they do what? They throw us in jail. They come and arrest us. They do all these other things. I don't give my money to a charity. That charity, dissolves. That's how it works. But the charity shows me what it does, and it says, hey, this is what we're doing in the name of this charity. And I go, look, what do you know? You're doing well. Like, why don't I have excess income? I'll give it to you. And I think people need to stop using Jesus as their crutch on either side, because I mean, from the conservative side, Jesus didn't, he went and ate with tax collectors that were deemed bad people. He went and, helped all of these people, the lepers, all these outcasts. He went and helped those people. He didn't say to you, no, you're not good enough for me, or no, I don't like you, or the Samaritan man, or, all these different things where Jesus he interacted specifically with people that were considered bad or not good or whatever you want to call it. And then from the left side, he never told anybody to do anything, like to forcibly take things from people. Like
it was always an option.
It was always an option. It was always an option with him. It was never like, go and do this, except make disciples of all nations. But it was never go and
but even that was optional. Money. they didn't have to do that. He gave them the choice.
Yeah, but again, it was one of those things where it's like everything with him came down to making a choice on your own personal faith and your own personal aspect, like experiences in that faith. And I don't understand why people keep using the name of Jesus to run hard to the right or to run hard to the left and try to take away from people. So from either aspect, from their social life, from their, financial and all that other kind of stuff. So the more I delved into libertarianism with my background in Christianity, more and more I come to, I think the term they called it was anarcho-Christian. Essentially, we have no king but Christ. And so when I tie this all back to this part, which was at the beginning in the Revolutionary War, it was in John Locke's Second Treatise of the Government, and he wrote in 1690, I think. He said he was talking about the colonists and the new people that came to the Americas, and they were talking about how they did not make their appeals to a king, their appeals of harassment and taxes and all these other things. They did not make their appeals to the king. They are instead trying to make their appeal to heaven, that they are to be free men, to live as they choose to live. And so you wrap all that into one, and there you have it. So far as my study into Christianity with libertarianism.
so, so I'm sure you've seen it. There have been different little memes and like posts and stuff that say Jesus would have been a socialist. Well, if you really think about it, Jesus would have been a libertarian, because everything was voluntary. You were allowed to make your own decision. And if you didn't choose what he said that, was the right way, he still loved you nonetheless. And that's the way libertarianism is. Like, it's a big melting pot of everyone and everything. I have met in my getting more active with the Libertarian Party and the different podcasts and all that stuff, I have met a wider array of just random people through all of this than anything else. There are very, very deeply faith-based Christians, and there are absolute total atheists. There are straight people and gay people and everything in between. It's like, it is such a, that's something that that really bothers me and kind of confuses me, is the Libertarian Party is such a melting pot, and the ideals and the principles and the values of libertarianism are so appealing to literally everybody. I don't understand why more people haven't gotten on with it and said yes, like looked at it. And maybe it's just a lack of messaging. I mean, the duopoly does a pretty good job.
They're in love with power.
Go.
They're in love with power. When you have the two sides, especially the two sides of the duopoly, one side is going to force their way onto the other side. And that means that I'm the good guy because I'm the more powerful side. When in all essence, that's all it is the power struggle between those two. And libertarianism is going, well, what if we didn't have power on your side or his side? What if it was all on our side together? And we each could make our own choices because personal autonomy and everything else. But instead, people argue over the power to control somebody, because that's one of the biggest things that people love doing. And we know that from human society, is just people want to control people. That's all they want to do. And so these two sides are going to continue fighting over keeping each other, down, or kicking each other and everything else, when we're the ones over on this third party saying, well, you're an adult. You can choose for yourself what you want to do. Why don't you take your own power back? That's why I love Spike's thing about you are the power, is, and it's essentially saying, like, you have your own autonomy. You can make decisions for yourself. And I think if, Libertarian Party ran with that, I feel like we'd get a lot more people, because that means that, say you want to go live in a socialist communist society where you have your own little commune and you do everything. So be it. You're allowed to do that. Just don't force it on anybody else. Say you want to go live in the middle of Montana where you don't have a neighbor that's, the closest neighbor is 5.5 miles away, and you can piss off your back porch. Go do it. That's what you can do. That's the thing about libertarianism is freedom for all means freedom to do whatever you want to.
I have been researching and listening to different opinions and conversations about different levels of anarchism, and the talking about the anso like anarcho socialism is a it's a really interesting, and even further than that, anarcho communism. They're really interesting concepts. I don't think it's for me, but it's like if they could make that kind of thing actually work, it would be pretty. It'd be pretty cool. But I don't think that's for me. That's not really my cup of tea. But yeah, I mean, and that's with the Libertarian Party. You know, we've got all of those. We've got the hardcore and caps, and then the and socias. The very very different schools of thought on everything, but we still all have ultimately, if the party could get over all the bickering and infighting and the bullshit, we all have effectively the same goal, and that's to get the government off of our backs and to be able to have a level of self determination and responsibility for our lives and the things that we want to do. And I guess that's the downfall of libertarianism is personal accountability and responsibility.
Well, yeah, because personal responsibility comes with the price. That means if you mess up, you got to pay for the consequences of it. And too many times nowadays, we just want to blame everybody else for our problems instead of taking the personal responsibility on ourselves. I mean, I've made mistakes. Everyone's made mistakes, but you got to pay for those consequences yourself instead of trying to put it off on somebody else. And it's just I think that's scary to a lot of people because they don't know how to. They've been, especially when it comes to where I went to school, I was taught a lot of critical race theory and all these theories involving the systems against you and everything else. And I'm like, man, it doesn't make any sense to me because the government's against you. Like, and the government was the one who created the system, but yet you're trying to use the government to try and make the system more equal when in fact you're making it less equal. Like the cognitive dissonance there makes it really hard for me to even understand what they're trying to talk about. But
The
the
system is corrupt. The system is the problem. So let's make the system bigger and give it more power so that it can fix the problem. Like, where's the?
yeah, I literally it's that hard to understand, but that's how it was. That's how it was for me, especially in college, and that's how it is growing up with some of the people that I know. Now the thing is that we can have conversations about those things. You want to talk about those things, and I do have conversations, very awkward conversations sometimes with people, but at least some people are willing to sit down and talk about that. But there's some people who aren't willing to sit down and talk about that. I think that's the biggest issue that we run into nowadays, is that so many people are so hard set in their beliefs that they don't want to even give a budge an inch or even a millimeter. For all you people who do millimeters, they don't want to move at all. And it's so dumb that to think that you have the right answer on everything. Like there's a lot of things I don't understand, but there's a lot of things I do understand. I understand that I want to be left alone and I want you to do things in your life and you can make the choices for yourself. And I don't want to control your life as long as you don't want to control my life. It's simple as that in my opinion. But
I don't think I have a huge listener base that lives in parts of the world that are on the metric system, so you don't have to try to do conversions.
hey, I'm just saying, man, you never know where these things take off. So I just want to cover all my bases.
Well, you got anything else you wanted to talk about?
I can't really think of anything. I mean, we've covered the two things that I really want to talk about, which is cronyism and specifically, I guess, Christianity when it comes to libertarianism. So,
Jesus was an ANCAP.
I mean, yeah, uh, it's people are going to twist it, completely separately. But I mean, not saying that I'm, a genius on it, but I've studied this a lot more than most people have, and I'll tell you right now, he definitely wasn't a socialist. He may have social ideas where he wanted to, take care of the poor and everything else, but all of that involved people choosing to take care of the poor, people choosing to better their society instead of people being forced to do all these things, because that doesn't help anybody.
Well, that's like, you can look at the early Christian church and early Christian communities, and a lot of those were largely supported by wealthy people within those communities, but those people weren't being forced to do that. Like, it was voluntarism. It was,
Mhm.
they made the choice that was something that they believed in, and that was something that they wanted to see flourish and prosper and to be a part of. And so they dedicated their time, they dedicated their money, they gave their homes, like, they allowed the church to happen in their own homes and stuff. Like, but the whole thing was not based around somebody forcing other people to do it. It was, they decided, this is what we want to do together and make it work.
Absolutely right.
All right, I think that's all I got. I was going to talk about Robin Hood too, but we don't have to get into that. Because Robin Hood did not actually rob from the rich. He was stealing tax money back. Robin Hood was a libertarian too. All these
Okay.
good libertarian.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know my Robin Hood as much as I do everything else.
You can be forgiven.
Yeah.
We'll have to add that to your bookshelf.
I mean, there's a lot already there, so good luck.
There's always room on the bookshelf for more.
I mean, yeah, I'm going to have a giant bookshelf here shortly. So, I mean, I already got one whole bookshelf full, and I'm going to have another like 8x8 bookshelf. So we'll get it on there. No worries.
All right, good deal. Well, that'll be a wrap for today's episode of Fact Check This Podcast. Be sure to join me next time. I'm not sure who I'm going to be interviewing again or next. It'll probably be a solo episode later in the week with me just talking about some random shit. I think we need to get Phil and Giles together and let them talk about the Bible. That'll be a fun conversation. In the meantime, everybody have a good week. Phil, say bye.
Bye.